And your supporters, the people who like you, the people who want you in office again, even those people agree that you're like a bad cold. You are like a bad cold. And that is the best the United States can get, in the opinion of the people who wrote this article and who gave testimony for this article. The best the US can hope for is a bad cold. A few days ago, Joe Biden gave his State of the Union address. And while a lot of people have already commented on that, I would like to focus today on a few of the reactions coming from neocon land and really the fun that this is and the sadness that it expresses for what the forthcoming election are going to be. Let's just look very, very quickly at the New York Times article entitled "Five Takeaways from the State of the Union," and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Really, just the very beginning here is. It sums it up very well for how sad the neocons currently are, that there's really nothing better here. President Biden, says the article, delivered an energetic and impassioned speech that was as much a campaign kickoff as it was a State of the Union. I personally find that quite revealing that, yeah, of course, the president is abusing his platform as president to basically do campaigning. Well, everybody does that, but yeah, that's what it was. It was like outlining in very dark terms, actually, very dark terms, I think, Joe Biden's visions for the United States and just trying to make the contrast between him and Trump as stark as possible, whether that's believable or not. Then the New York Times article also says, Mr. Biden has rarely been called a bold orator. But he arrived on Capitol Hill on Thursday with the benefit of merciful low expectations after unrelenting Republican attacks on his mental and physical fitness. And it is so funny. The New York Times, and it says that low expectations were the best that could happen to Mr. Biden, and he met those low expectations. He lived up to them. Thumbs up for Joe Biden. This is to me, this is hilarious. I mean, read this, like, mercifully low expectations. Okay, nobody expects anything fantastic from Joe Biden. Even the New York Times didn't expect something. So the fact that Joe Biden just didn't screw up, is already like 2 thumbs up, and everybody is like, yay, President Biden. But the real piece of art is this article here in Foreign Policy. And again, Foreign Policy is kind of one of these typical neocon outlets, although, to be fair to them, they also carry articles from contrarian voices like Glenn, I'm not sure if Glenn Deason published in here, but certainly Anatole Leaf, and I'm sure of that. And I have an article in here. So they do publish other stuff, but it's like 10% rationality and 90% neocon stuff. And this one is written by a guy called Michael Hirsch, a columnist for Foreign Policy. So this expresses kind of, official foreign policy opinion or analysis of what happens. And the title is "Biden starkly lays out the stakes for 2024. The president delivered one of the most politically significant State of the Union addresses in memory." So Foreign Policy crowns this piece, or Michael Hirsch crowns his State of the Union one of the most important ones of the, of the history of the United States, of the 250 more, 70 years, almost 250 years of US existence, right? This man, Joseph Biden. But then it gets really hilarious the further down we go. Please stick around. So it starts with US President Joe Biden delivered one of the most political and politically significant State of the Union addresses in memory on Thursday night, laying out in the starkest of terms the stakes of the forthcoming election for the United States and the entire world. Just so you know, it's not just about the US, it's about the entire world. Because as we all know, the United States is the master of the world and controls the world. Therefore, the elections of the President of the United States is actually an election of world leader. We all know that if aliens came to Earth tomorrow and said, "Bring me to your leader," then the Americans would immediately say, "He's here, Washington, he's here." That's how people view this, and that's this is the globalist mindset, right? There's something that Alexander Christoforou and Alex Mercouris point out continuously. Neocon globalist mindset is like center of the universe, right? Washington D.C., and it's always everything that happens in Washington, D.C. is a fight between good and evil, between the forces of democracy versus autocracy. And again, like the entire article is written in this framework, as if though the entire world, was just waiting for the next US president, which is actually not untrue, at least in political terms. The US has an outsized weight, of course. But the article continues. Biden cast his almost certain 2024 opponent, former President Donald Trump, in the menacing role of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, in his State of the Union address, Joe Biden compared the former president of the United States to Adolf Hitler. So the United States was already ruled for 4 years by the second coming of Adolf Hitler. That's how horrible it was. Although this former president of the United States did not kill 6 million Jews, did not start a world war, it didn't start a war at all. I mean, he is the second coming of Hitler. And that must be okay to say, because this is what the Democrats and the globalists want everybody to believe, right? If Donald Trump gets elected again, despite the fact that he already was in power once for 4 years, the next 4 years are going to be, Nazism in the United States. This is being reported as one of the most important State of the Union addresses by the globalists. It's quite fantastic, right? Just imagine for 1 second the outrage if Donald Trump ever dared to compare Joe Biden to Adolf Hitler. This would be huge. I mean, he would probably have another 2 or 3 lawsuits to go through if he ever did that for downplaying the Holocaust or something like that, right? But if the Democrats do it to the Republicans, and if Joe Biden does it to Donald Trump, then it's okay, because everybody knows Donald Trump apparently second Hitler, obviously. The article continues. In other words, the president seems to be saying the nation faces in Trump an even more perilous threat today than FDR and Abraham Lincoln. Biden accused Trump of bowing down to Russian President Vladimir Putin over his Ukraine invasion, despite the fact that the Ukraine invasion happened when Joe Biden was in power, and it happened when Joe Biden was the commander-in-chief and refused to negotiate with the Russians in December 2021. So for some reason, Joe Biden seems to want to blame, and the foreign policy also seems to agree, that really Donald Trump is to blame for the war in Ukraine. That he bowed down and that he's a Putin puppet. And you can already see how this narrative of Putin and Trump being in collusion is already emerging again. I mean, it's getting more and more explicit here. The article continues. Biden repeatedly sounded the theme of combined domestic and foreign threat posed by Trump. And then the article switches to one of the main arguments, what everybody was looking out to in the State of the Union speech. One thing is clear. Biden and his team were intent on overcoming all at once the cascading doubts about his age. And it's true, right? Because the State of the Union address was awaited most eagerly to see whether or not Joe Biden could actually stand there for 70, 80 minutes and just talk without any gaps. And actually he delivered on that. And everybody, again, as I said in the beginning, everybody's happy that he lived up to the minimum standards of being able to read to a camera a prepared speech that he must have been practicing for weeks, right? So apparently he did this with great grace. But the article says, will it work to save his presidency? Big question mark, right? Can he, living up to minimum standards, can it save the presidency? And then the article, like other articles that I've seen floating around, it focuses on this primary issue. That's going to be the entire theme of the Democratic presidential race, which is Joe Biden is not as bad as Donald Trump. And here, this is the center. This is the central essence of this article, and it is so beautiful because it is so funny. It's so funny. I mean, this is pure comedy. Let me read it to you. But if that is all there is left, if the choice is between a bad cold versus cancer, then the course suddenly becomes clearer. The question is, what do you rather want, a bad cold or cancer? So this is the columnist, right? This is the author of the article who says, okay, Joe Biden is maybe like a bad cold, but Donald Trump is like having a cancer. So the article actually not only is like very in the highest terms disrespectful to the former president of the United States, also the current president and maybe the future one is being described as a bad cold. And then the article starts quoting Norm Courts, Biden's former Senate communications director. So get this, Biden's former communication director says that people always like to say that they have to choose between the lesser of two evils. Biden's refrain that voters should not compare him to the Almighty but to the alternative will begin to resonate. The communications director actually is admitting that Joe Biden is an evil, but it's a lesser evil than the other guy, and therefore the lesser evil should win, right? Because voters are reasonable. I mean, how sad can it get when even your former communications director starts saying that the best selling point that you have going for you, and I'm going to say this publicly, is that you are the lesser of two evils. And your supporters, the people who like you, the people who want you in office again, even those people agree that you're like a bad cold. You are like a bad cold. And that is the best the United States can get, in the opinion of the people who wrote this article and who gave testimony for this article. The best the US can hope for is a bad cold. This is so sad, while at the same time the entire world is watching, right? And this is the leader of the free world. A bad cold. I'm sorry, guys. I cannot not laugh. This is just so inherently funny. This article is so funny, and I think that the person who wrote this doesn't realize how funny it is what he just wrote. The article continues. His speech recalled past moments when US presidents sought to clarify the stake at an existential level, right? The stakes at an existential level. So the article just tries to hype up how absolutely horrible Donald Trump will be, right? That it's the end, it's Nazis, it's Hitler, it's the end, it's like annihilation or a bad cold. This is all that they have left. This is all the globalists have left. The article continues. Yet it was also a measure of the delicate balance that Biden has been forced to achieve in his presidency, restoring America's traditional global cop role while playing to the neo-isolationist sentiment that Trump has awakened, that the president deferred to the millions of voters who believe the United States is overextended in the world. And this is what the columnist here really hates. You know, he hates, this person dislikes people who don't want the United States to warmonger in all four corners of the world, who dislike it that there's 1,000 military bases, US military bases around the globe, that the US is involved in everywhere militarily and bombs people's homes in West Asia, helps bombing and keeping alive a proxy war in Ukraine, is interfering in the internal politics of South America, and is trying to have a war with China somewhere down the road. I mean, the fact that there are people who dislike that's what these columnists dislike, and they call these people isolationists. People who don't want the United States to constantly go to war. These people are called neo-isolationists. While he then tries to portray here Mr. Biden as, you know, a statesman, maybe a bad cold, but a statesman who will lead the United States and who will lead the world. And leading the world always means, of course, militarily, right? There is no other thinking that these people have than military intervention as a way of leading the world, when in fact all you do is actually, you know, the defending the interest of a very small group of people of the military-industrial complex in the United States, and for that you're then willing to kill or have millions of people die, either directly at the hands of the US or indirectly through proxies, or indirectly through like regime change and so on and so forth. This had happened more than enough over the past 80 years. But yeah, this article. There's a little bit more. It also says, the article says that Biden declared, "I will restore Roe versus Wade as the law of the land again." And I just need to say this. Anyone who still believes that the Democrats are real about this is either blind, deaf, or dumb. It's like the Democrats in 2020, they had the presidency, they had the House, and they had the Senate For 2 years, all they would have needed to do is to pass a law, and the president signs it into law, that Roe v. Wade is now the law of the land. They didn't do it. They didn't do it, and that's why the Supreme Court could strike the previous case down. This is a political issue that the Democrats do not want resolved. They don't want it because it is so juicy. It is so nice to have something that liberals, that's really dear to liberals, and that they can claim that they defend it, but they will never actually defend it. This is nonsense. This is an utter lie, and you just need to watch Jimmy Dore on this issue. He has made this absolutely clear. This Roe v. Wade could have been made into legislation. Hard binding legislation and signed into law by the president during the 2 years that they controlled everything. They didn't do it. Joe Biden didn't do it. The Democrats didn't do it. They didn't want Roe v. Wade in an actual law. And then the Supreme Court couldn't overturn that law. It couldn't, because the Supreme Court is bound to interpret what the will of the law is, right? Roe v. Wade is not a law. That's why the Supreme Court could overturn it, a conservative Supreme Court, right? So it's just insane, the talking points. And this is maybe one of the last things they have left in order to really appeal to well-meaning liberals who actually value the right to choose. And that's fine. That's a fine, legitimate political opinion. And the fact that they are still playing to this is just amazing, because you do need to believe that people are utterly dumb to still believe you that you would defend Roe v. Wade when for 2 years you controlled all branches necessary in order to make it legislation. But of course he brings that one up, of course, because there's nothing else left. Then the article also says the rhetoric was resounding, even incendiary, possibly a little desperate. But Biden, let's face it, will never be a great speechmaker. The stiffness, slurring, and occasional stutters that seem to make every Biden speech a breathless high-wire act. One never knows if he'll get all the way through a sentence without stumbling, were all there Thursday night, accompanied by an occasional coughing spell between applause lines. The challenge for Biden and Americans is that this opponent, the previous president, is now deploying similar apocalyptic rhetoric. The data of accomplishments are clearly on Biden's side. So that's all they have to offer at the moment. All they have to offer is to say that Biden is not as bad, is not as frail, is not as horrible, is not as evil as Donald Trump. Therefore, we need to vote for him. This is going to set the agenda for the entire next 8 years. And it is, I mean, it's really funny if it wasn't so sad for the United States and for my friends in the US, that really, obviously, even the people who like Donald Trump, even the people who like Joe Biden, compare him to a bad cold. And that's the best that the US apparently can hope for.